Buffalo Bills. Start with the Bills. Biggest needs for the Bills.
Bills, pretty good roster, I think. Largely depth. I think they could use a second starting corner. They just re-signed Christian Benford to a nice extension. He's been an amazing story for them. Saved the bad draft pick of Kyer Elam in the first round by being a better player in the sixth and earning his extension. I think they could use the big-bodied nose tackle that we've talked about before with a couple of teams. They get paired with Kenneth Grant a lot in that first round. That I think makes a ton of sense if he makes it that far. Again, kind of similar to the Packers, except slightly differently. Like, do they need, forget the number one wide receiver, do they need an X receiver skill set? Do they need somebody that can play that X boundary, press coverage, outside perimeter alignment? Because they still don't have that. They haven't had it since they traded away Stephon Diggs, and they don't show any real interest in acquiring it. So it's at least worth asking the question, do they need that, or do they just not care?
Yeah, so if we're talking specific needs, you're right. I mean, you started with corner. I think that's first and foremost. I think they are this is right now, unless there is a Asante Samuel Jr. deal to be made, which was rumored quite a bit around free agency. Unless that's happening, to me, this feels a little bit like last year. We knew the Bills needed to draft a receiver early, and that was one of the biggest stories in the draft. They were sitting there at pick 27, I believe it was. Who are they going to pick? They traded down. Kansas City Chiefs went up and got Xavier Worthy. Right now, the cornerback feels like a similar spot where they're picking late first, and they're probably going to pick a corner unless they know they're picking signing Asante Samuel Jr. to be the starter opposite Christian Benford. If that is the case, though, and they bring in Samuel, that's awesome, man. Like, all of a sudden, you just are picking best player available, and you've got a first and 2 seconds. But I think that the late first-round corners, Azariah Thomas from Florida State, would make sense there. Shavon Ravel, I still think both him and Thomas have the long man coverage ability that it felt like Buffalo wants to play against Kansas City. And that's not necessarily Benford's skill set. He could do, he could play off. He could play a little bit of press. But I do wonder if they want that press man skill set for when they're playing the Chiefs, which they didn't get a chance to really perform because of injuries last year, right? A couple times. So that's what I'm looking at late first for Buffalo. Defensive line depth. You mentioned the nose tackles. I really think Deion Walker from Kentucky is an intriguing upside type of play in the second round for them because of his length and size and movement skills, even though he had that back injury last year that hurt his play. What?
You now tinkered with the numbers and you think he's good again?
No, I've always thought that he ends up in the second round for teams unless it's like a chronic back injury. I've always thought of him as I've always been intrigued by the upside play. He's huge, man. He's huge and moves pretty well, even though he didn't test very well as far as explosiveness goes. He only had a couple tests at the combine.
Yeah, he's not. But this is the thing. Like, he didn't. It was sort of a little bit like like Mason Graham when he was listed at 320, and it's like, man, how does he move that fast for 320? It's like, well, he moves that fast for 320 because he's 295, right? Deion Walker's big, but he's not that big. Like,
someone corrected you that Graham lost a lot of weight right before they may have played at 305 or 310. Just
305 is still 15 pounds less than 320. The point is, when you're asking how does he move like that for 320, the answer is because he was never anywhere near 320. Like, that's how he moved that well for 320. I like as Deion Walker is big, but he's not like, Tavondre Sweat. He's not like the Eagles guy, Jordan Davis. Like, he's not otherworldly freaky big. He's just a pretty big nose tackle, and he moves like well for that, but not like freaky well. And offsetting that is that for all the good plays he makes is a ton of abysmal plays that he makes. Like, I'm just not like Jordan Davis was like all-time freaky Planet Theory, Bill Parcells type of world where you go, okay, I'm buying into that because there's one of those humans walking the planet right now. Deion Walker's not that. Like, he's not. It's we've been having this discussion off air a lot. Like, unless you're in the complete outliers of the sort of various things, if you're a 98th percentile plus athlete or size or whatever, or below the threshold, anything in the middle is basically the same. Is he 98th plus percentile anything?
Here you go again. That's what gets us off the rails, is you ranting about one player that I suggested
You're
as a potential
going
option
back
for
to
the
the
Bills.
Deion Walker thing.
I'm not going back on it. He's always been a second or third round type of player. Anyway, we lost it now. Jaden Higgins, man. Jaden Higgins for the Bills as well, if you want to fill that X receiver spot there. Trey Amos at corner, Maxwell Hairston, all of those cornerback options. I like Ravel and Thomas, though, a little bit better for the Bills. Let's go Miami Dolphins, their biggest need. People are asking, at least some people asking, that we don't like each other again.
Yeah, it's hard to believe.
Maybe it's because you had to yell at me about Deion Walker.
Well,
Let's go Dolphins.
Be consistent, that's all I'm saying. Dolphins still need offensive line. Still a massive need. I think you could argue they need a left guard, a right tackle, and maybe a left tackle if Teron Armstead is he's in that world as well. You got to budget in quarter of the season missed, and B, he's reaching the end of his time there, right? So you could argue they still need 3 offensive linemen.
That's why Kelvin Banks feels like a great fit for the Dolphins in the first. Could he play guard right away? Sure. Kick out to tackle at some point. I think that's a really nice fit for Miami. Second round offensive line, Arante Ursary in the mix there. I mean, this could be a double up. Charles Grant from William and Mary, tackle guard ability. I think any of those guys that can play guard, like Josh Simmons, we keep talking about, probably doesn't start at guard. I always say that, but like Laramie Tunsil also felt like the guy that should never start at guard, and he did for Miami for 2 years. I think it was for 2 years. So maybe Simmons plays guard at some point too, but I would look to more of the players that could play guard but also have tackle ability. That's Kelvin Banks, could be Charles Grant later in the draft as well. But yeah, offensive line, I think the biggest need for Miami. I completely agree.
Yeah, and multiple spots on it.
Anything else for the Dolphins here? Maybe cornerback depth?
Yeah. I mean, I think they could use depth at a couple other spots, but to me, they're another one where like they have one really glaring acute need and the rest can kind of like, fill in.
So double up on defensive line for the Dolphins.
Offensive line.
Offensive line, man. It's because I've been telling everybody to double up on defensive line. Cornerback to me depends on what they think of Cam Smith, second round pick a couple years ago. Trusting him opposite Jalen Ramsey. I still think they need the youth play there, and they could be looking at that second wave of cornerbacks as well. Darian Porter from Iowa State could be a nice fit for them.
All right, that's enough of that, Steve. Over 50% of the people listening to this are not subscribed right now. So click that button, and then we can get back to whatever it is Steve's telling you about.
New York Jets. New York Jets are next. Biggest needs for the Jets.
So they still need the quarterback of the future. Like Justin Fields probably isn't that unless he shows another development, another step forward, another significant jump, which I think is theoretically there, but it's, the deal he signed is not like Q quarterback is solved for the future. They need a cornerback too, opposite. My brain is just dying these days.
Sauce.
There you go, Sauce. It's like
you're almost 43, man. It's tough.
Stuff just falling out of my head. Like names don't exist anymore. The recall, like the memory, go back to memory bank, pull out the name. It's just like dead end. Like there's a wire frayed.
It's because
I know they brought in Brandon Stevens, but
we both have better recall in the 2010 decade than we do right now. It's bad. We got to push that. We got to push that out a little bit. Get some more 2025 knowledge in there.
There needs to be you get the program that was trying to run on my computer or like cleans out the old crap. Like you need that for your brain. Like purge anything pre 2010. We don't need that anymore. You need
temp files.
The new stuff. Anyway, I know they brought in Brandon Stevens, but like listen to Ravens fans, they don't believe that Brandon Stevens is a guy that you want as your starting corner. It's definitely a massive downgrade over what DJ Reed was a year ago. They're another team like the Eagles' defensive line depth that's been chipped away at over the last couple of years. They need to kind of restock that, but like cornerback to defensive line depth.
I'd throw right tackle specifically in there. That's why I think Armand Membo might be in the mix there at 7. The quarterback thing's interesting. We heard Aaron Glenn was talking about Justin Fields and his ability to run the ball and how they were going to tap into that. Does that mean that Jalen Milroe could be your developmental guy? Just because if you are, and I'm intrigued by this, Sam, right? Let me just throw this out there. We talk a lot about running quarterbacks raising the floor of offenses. Justin Fields almost made the Bears tank-proof in 2023, got them up to 7 wins because he wins a couple games with his legs. Last year, he's 4-2 with the Steelers, trending in the right direction. Is the floor actually kind of high now for the Jets? Because if they are going to tap into that for Fields, he's going to carry the ball 10 to 15 times per game. Is that how they're going to run their offense? And if that's the case, is Milroe the best developmental quarterback to sit behind Justin Fields here?
I mean, maybe, but so, when the Ravens kind of did this a little bit with Lamar Jackson and then Snoop Huntley, right? It's like you get a similar style of player so that you don't have to change anything when the starter goes down, as opposed to, if Joe Flacco is your backup, you got to junk the offense and go with something completely different when he has to come in. The difference being you knew Lamar Jackson was going to be the guy long term. I don't see there's not a point in maintaining the consistency if Justin Fields, if he's a 1-year deal, right? You don't work out this year, you move on, you go find a new quarterback. Well, then there was no point in finding a guy that's stylistically similar, except for the 2 games that you might have needed him for last year, which just doesn't, I don't know. I think if you're looking for a guy that's the future, you're just looking for who you think the best quarterback to develop is. You don't care that he's stylistically vaguely similar.
Quarterback, I don't know if they're going to see corner as a need just because they're going to lock up Sauce, and they did sign Brandon Stevens. They opted into that. Whether we, you know what I mean? We have to look at it this is what the Jets did. They signed Brandon Stevens. We might not like him. The Ravens fans might not like him, but the Jets signed him to be their starter next to Sauce Gardner.
Yeah. I mean, 3-year, $23 million guaranteed over 3 years. It's definitely starter money, but is it enough to stop you drafting a guy that could be his replacement / competition?
No, I think again, second round's a good value there. I think defensive tackle too. They need probably some heft up front next to Quinn Williams, Leonard Taylor, last year's UDFA, not always dependable off the field, which is why really talented player went undrafted. So I think they need some defensive tackle help as well. So insert all the defense. I'll just say Alfred Collins' name this time. Okay, insert all the defensive tackles that we've previously mentioned that should be considered here from the Jets. I think Membu, the more I think about it, though, if he's there at 7, the unsexy first pick for the new regime for the Jets, get the tackle, plug him in at right tackle. You've now drafted tackles 2 straight years. Probably the best way to kick things off here for the Jets.
You'd also argue they need wide receiver 2 as well. Obviously yes. Garrett Wilson is fantastic, but Alan Lazard, Josh Reynolds, who they signed, that's another, they opted in. But, is Josh Reynolds stopping you signing a wide receiver 2? And then you get a lot of young guys that they haven't shown that they could be relied on as wide receiver 2 yet.
Reynolds is completely different, though. It's a 1-year, $4.5 million deal versus Stevens making $12 million APY. So completely different, Sam. No, Josh Reynolds not keeping you from drafting a wide receiver. So they should grab one of that second wave of receivers for sure. All right, let's round out the East. New England Patriots and their biggest needs and why it's the offensive line.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same as it's been. It's kind of like the Seahawks, the same problems from last year. You still need an offensive line. You still need a wide receiver group. You might need a running back as well, but it's the 2 biggest needs. Obviously, now you need a backup quarterback too.
Backup quarterback because Joe Milton been shipped off to Dallas for some reason. Anyway, Patriots at 4, Will Campbell, Armand Membu, whoever you like better, grab a tackle. I mean, all the reports that they do like Will Campbell in the building, and the fact that he stretched his arm out and the tape measure said 33 one time. I think it's Campbell at 3. Unless Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter is there. I'm sorry, at 4. I think it's Will Campbell at 4 for New England. Tick the left tackle box, and then maybe you double up at receiver again in this draft. Even though you did that last year, you have to find dependable options. Stephon Diggs could only be a 1-year deal. Even if he's there, you could still use 2 playmakers. Double up. Grab both Ohio State guys. You got ex-receiver Jaden Higgins. You got speed Jalen Knoll. Get Iowa State to New England.
You get the Iowa State guys. You get the Ohio State guy. Ibuka would be a good fit here. Even Stephon Diggs can hold that outside spot for a year. Ibuka would be a great upgrade as the 2 or 3. You can't let last year. I like the process last year. I just spam the positions of need and hope that somebody shows up, and none of them did. None of them, wide receiver or offensive line, basically none of them showed anything year one. But I don't think that means the process was flawed. It means you just need to do it again. And I hope that this time somebody shows up.
Is that the trend around the NFL, by the way? The Eagles draft all the Georgia players, and then the Rams doubled up on Florida State defensive linemen with, Braden Fisk and Jared Verse, and that seemed to work. I mean, is that going to be the new copycat thing? Just draft teammates because they like each other?
Maybe. I always thought so. Somebody, who was it? Washington State, Kyle Williams, right? Somebody is pairing Kyle Williams to the Titans in the second or the third round because Kyle Williams used to play with Cam Ward. And I've always loved, and there's no evidence for this. It's annoying because it's like zero evidence that this is a thing. But I've always loved the idea of pairing a rookie quarterback with like his favorite college target. It fits in my head as a good thing. It seems like it should have value, and yet there's no evidence whatsoever that it does. But I really like that as a pairing.
Just like Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase. I mean, look how well that worked. That's the only reason why it worked is because LSU.
Yeah, it's one data point for two guys that went in the top 5 picks or whatever it was.
All right, stay focused. That's it. New England good offensive players for New England. Those are their needs.
Thanks for watching all the way to the end of our video.
For more great content, click here to subscribe and here to watch another video. We'll see you again soon.